Is the Apple Pencil worth it for people who aren't really artists? In today's video, I'll be diving into why I have one, even though I don't draw, and that's mostly because I can't draw anything. In fact, I've never used my iPad Pro for drawing any type of pictures, but is it still useful? Comes down to your individual use cases, so let's talk about mine. So the primary message I want to get across in today's video is that the Apple Pencil is not a required accessory for the iPad Pro. In fact, I think including such an amazing and detailed and intricate stylus that allows you to pair and charge it so easily would likely drive the starting price of the iPad Pro a lot higher, to the point that I'm okay that Apple doesn't include a stylus with the iPad. Granted, yeah, it would be great if they could include the Apple Pencil with the iPad and not increase the prices, but I have to be realistic here. There's a lot of technology that goes into this device, and Apple would likely be losing a lot of money if they just decided to give it to everyone. But I also think it would be kind of wasteful, because there's a ton of people out there who want to buy iPads, specifically the awesome iPad Pro, and they're not artists. You know, they don't need something to draw with. But personally, I have two major use cases for the Apple Pencil that are not artistry related. For one, it's been particularly helpful when using Safari, because we know how iOS is a touch dominant interface. Yes, now technically with iPadOS, you can pair a mouse to the iPad as an accessibility feature, but it's definitely not a primary one, not one Apple wants everybody getting used to. They want you using the touchscreen, and third-party apps and first-party apps are going to do the best they can to optimize their apps to be touch-friendly, which involves designing the apps very, very differently. I mean, if you just look at desktop iMovie and compare it to mobile iMovie, it behaves very, very different, because they know on one of these things you're using a mouse, and on the other you're using a touch interface, mostly your finger. The thing is, though, when you go to desktop sites on Safari using your iPad, they're not really designed for touch-friendly user interfaces, because now with iPadOS they're all grabbing the desktop version of those sites. So a lot of buttons can end up being a lot smaller, or a lot of the web's design is built for you being able to click and drag across the timeline of certain videos. Particularly me as a creator, when you're using the YouTube site from an iPad, your finger can interact with the touch interface, but the benefit of the Apple Pencil when you're using a desktop site is very, very helpful for clicking, or I guess tapping, whatever place on the website you want, that sometimes your finger's not very good at being specific, either because your finger's too big or it creates too big of a footprint. Whenever you touch the glass of your iPad Pro, you're covering too much area that the iPad isn't quite sure what you want to be tapping or what you want to be clicking on when you're using a desktop class website. So having the Apple Pencil helps everything be more specific. So I would say that's the secondary reason I like having an Apple Pencil. The primary reason is for when I make video thumbnails and oftentimes have to mask out objects. As a creator, I've been uploading all of my video thumbnails across all my channels using pro apps available on the iPad Pro that I'll go more into in my iPad Pro 10 months review video, which will come out in a couple weeks. But essentially, when you're doing some type of Photoshop or masking, even without the official Photoshop application, having an Apple Pencil is really, really helpful for that. In case any of you were wondering why Drew has an Apple Pencil, even though he doesn't draw a lot. But I do admit it is an expensive accessory at $129. Granted, with the ProMotion display and iPadOS shrinking the latency even less so, it's a really, really good stylus. In fact, I would go as far to say this is probably the best stylus you can get with any touch interface out there. But granted, I'm no artist, I'm no animation expert. I just make my stupid YouTube video thumbnails that a lot of you guys hate anyway. I don't blame you. But it's helpful when you're using a desktop site that's clearly assuming you have a mouse when you don't. And I'm sure a lot of people out there have purchased the Apple Pencil, even though they're not really artists, just because they like being able to scroll and tap around with it more, because using a stylus can feel a bit more fun with a tablet. Personally, I don't see the point of it on a phone, but there is the Galaxy Note series. A lot of people just like using a stylus sometimes. So I guess you could say, yeah, Steve Jobs was technically wrong when he said, "Who wants a stylus?" I mean, they're people, Steve. Maybe they're not everyone, but they exist. Anyway, those are the two primary uses for my Apple Pencil, and why it has kind of paid for itself just by helping me mask out things when doing video thumbnails, doing photo work for other projects. In fact, when I would take pictures of me and my wife sometimes, I can use it for little touch-ups, which is sort of helpful. And of course, when browsing desktop sites, it's been useful for me. So even though I'm not an artist, the Apple Pencil was worth it. But maybe you don't use a lot of desktop sites on Safari, and maybe you don't run a YouTube channel and don't really need anything for masking and picture editing. Yes, everything I use the Apple Pencil for, I could technically do just with my regular fingers, but you could probably apply that to artists as well. It's just, it would be a lot harder. It's harder to be specific. It's harder to communicate with the iPad and let it know exactly what pixels you want gone from this picture, or exactly what button you're trying to click on this particular website. Yeah, you can do it with your finger. It's just more comfortable to do it with a stylus, so that's how I justify it. Whether it's worth it for you, you gotta decide for yourself. Anyway, let me know if you're on the fence about buying an Apple Pencil, and if you have more questions about it, hit me up over on Twitter or join our Discord. This is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you guys in the next one.